Have you ever observed your youngster behaving without apparent cause? What if their actions were a silent cry for assistance, a response to something much more severe happening in their lives? When my son began to rebel, I experienced exactly that. I initially believed it to be a passing phase, the usual teenage fare. I later learned the actual reason, though. He was aware that his mother was unfaithful. He was consumed by the betrayal. Therefore, I decided to act independently and seek retribution on his behalf. This is how it all transpired. My son was acting out because he was aware that his mother was unfaithful. I ensured that she unintentionally exposed herself and her boyfriend. Here's a little about myself. I'm 37 years old and my wife is 37. Let's name her Charity for the purposes of this discussion. I was a freshman in college when we first met. She had it all together while I was still figuring out what I wanted to accomplish with my life. She already had a clear goal for her life and was very ambitious and focused. At the time, I thought it was imposing that she aspired to be an academic. None of the girls I've dated in the past were severe. They just wanted to have fun. Charity, however, was unique. She was always focused on the future, planning and bringing things to pass. I was drawn to her for that reason. I was not used to someone who has their life planned out so early. I realized that I needed that positive impact if I wanted to take life seriously. She was self-assured enough to tackle any challenge. She made things happen rather than merely following the crowd. I quickly concluded that I was genuinely attracted to her, not only because she was driven, but also because she inspired me to improve myself. So yes, our dating years were brief and filled with that nascent fervor. If I'm being sincere, I wish I still had that. Things quickly became intense. Everyone in our immediate vicinity was already aware that, should neither of us make a mistake, we could get married. I had to hope at the time that I wouldn't be the one to ruin things because my buddies used to make fun of me for it. Back then, I didn't have the most incredible faith in myself, and now that I'm a parent, I describe myself as a rascal. Charity discovered she was expecting a child almost a year into their relationship. It's not in the plan, for sure. We were utterly unprepared for it. I understand that Charity had lofty goals for her career, but she didn't want to have the baby because she thought it would completely ruin them. However, neither our family nor I are the kind to insist on a termination. She held her parents in the highest regard, and I believe they influenced her choice more than I did. Our first son was born due to our decision to keep the child. All of this hurt me. For Charity to complete her degree, I had to put a lot of my things on wait. She had to give up on her dreams, and I didn't want her to look back and feel resentment toward the child. I passed up a lot: time, fantastic opportunities, and even a firm job offer out of state. It seemed worthwhile because I believed in her and what we were creating. I also knew I would have to compromise because I had supported the idea of not terminating. However, we did not immediately tie the knot. First came our kid. We waited because Charity loved the idea of a white wedding gown and having a flat stomach to match it. But yes, shortly after the baby was born, we were married. We were both young and stupid, or at least I was more so than she was. We also made a lot of blunders, just like any young couple. Charity harbored a slight grudge against the baby, who she believed had pushed her into marriage before her time. I mean, everyone would, and I understand. Her entire life was planned out, and then suddenly, she had a spouse and a child. But to be honest, we picked things up fast. Over time, things with the infant became more accessible, and we adapted. After completing her degree and earning her master's, Charity became an assistant instructor. I was really pleased with her. I used to constantly boast about her to my buddies, man. Without a doubt, she was the finest. We had 2 additional children later in our marriage, and for a while, I believed we were a good match. She put forth a lot of effort, raised our earning capacity significantly, and helped us establish a respectable standard of living. We were comfortable even if we weren't rich. The foundation of the house was charity, charity, charity. She managed the household, cared for the children, and ran everything like a boss. I only needed to concentrate on ensuring I fulfilled my responsibilities as a spouse and providing for my family. I didn't mind at all, to be honest. But I became relaxed. I gave her most of the decision-making authority. It felt appropriate at the time, but now that I think about it, I question whether letting go of so much responsibility, especially with the daily tasks, contributed to everything that transpired afterward. The problem is that I thought our relationship was going well. I didn't see anything unusual or strange. We were a middle-aged couple who had been married for over 10 years. There were no fireworks anymore, of course. Still, it seemed like we were old best friends again, steady, calm, and quiet, without any insane intensity. Even if I'm not very good at expressing myself, that's how I feel. The funny part is that I realized what was genuinely happening because of my son's conduct and my attempts to diagnose him. As far as I'm aware, he began acting strangely, which is not unusual for teenagers. It went beyond the typical mood swings of adolescence. He was entirely out of character to treat his mother with such disdain. I tried to resolve the conflict between him and his mother, but was unsuccessful. I believe she still harbored some hatred, but also loved him if we dig deeper. I also didn't get off easy. He avoided me. He wasn't unpleasant, but wouldn't converse with me. Bully mentality kicked in with his younger siblings. He always seemed upset about everything, and I couldn't understand why. Despite our best efforts to reprimand him, nothing appeared to work, including grounding and removing privileges. I even thought about the belt, like how I was raised, but I concluded that would worsen matters. All he felt was anger. The child, after all, had all he required. We weren't overbearing or strict, so this behavior completely confused us. My wife even began recommending therapy since it had gotten so severe. At that point, I understood that I had to intervene and take more severe action to determine what was wrong with him. After discussing it with a few friends, I decided to take a day off work to spend quality time with my son. I even called his school and informed them that he was sick to give us the day to ourselves. I went to speak with him in his room later that day. Teenagers are like that, but after much back and forth, my kid suddenly revealed something I didn't anticipate. He claimed his mother was unfaithful to me. I initially dismissed it with a laugh. I had known her for a more extended period than he had, and I had a strong suspicion that he detested her and used it as a means of ruining her life. When would she have time to cheat when constantly working or caring for things at home? It didn't add up between her job, picking up the kids, and running errands. My son wasn't kidding, though. I knew I had to pay close attention when he seemed so serious. Even though he occasionally acted rudely and disrespectfully, I didn't think he was a liar. I became concerned since he tended to be a little too honest. He informed me that his mother had been having an affair with one of his school teachers. Not in a friendly manner, but strangely, as if it wasn't only a teacher-parent relationship. My kid had skipped school and was with his buddies. I was taken aback. My kid was crying by this time, but I continued asking him if he was sure or perhaps wrong. He was more vulnerable than I'd seen him in decades and adamant that he had seen them together more than once, both in her car and outside school. It dawned on him then that this was the reason behind his strange behavior, his wrath, and how he acted out. He even admitted to me that he had been harboring hatred toward his mother since he believed she had never wanted him in the first place and had treated him differently than his siblings. In addition to what he had witnessed, he became even more enraged with her and angry at me for my ignorance and failure to recognize what was happening before my eyes. I was shaken, but I wasn't prepared to make rash decisions. My child recently made a serious claim that might impact our family dynamic and possibly ruin it forever. However, I also wasn't going to brush it off. I will confess that I contributed to his ire. I asked him if he could look further and acquire more information. I needed to know the truth, even though it wasn't my proudest moment. I hoped that by having him look into it, he may show me wrong and get over his wrath, since perhaps I was too cowardly to do it myself. The strategy was straightforward. Look through her call logs and text messages. I thought she would only remove something if she was tech-savvy. However, I had my son look around her phone because it would have been suspicious if I had done it myself. She wouldn't suspect anything because he was already disrespectful to her and angry with me. He only needed to snap screenshots and forward them to me. I will confess that I contributed to his ire. I asked him if he could look further and acquire more information. However, my boy had another idea and proposed tracking her phone with spyware. I let him handle that as I had no knowledge of it. He conducted all of the research and he sent me evidence. I began to pay closer attention to Charity while he worked on it. Oddly enough, she wasn't acting suspiciously or arriving home late. No strange justifications, no last-minute business trips, etc. She simply went to her office nearly daily to prepare for lectures and had more meetings at work, including on the weekends. She didn't behave defensively or distantly, as you see in all those stories about cheating. She always gave me a plausible explanation when I questioned her about her schedule. I was this close to persuading Jason to halt the research before he set up everything with the malware and handed me the proof. Thank God, though, I didn't. I noticed the messages. It was all there when I read them, and I'll never be able to learn how they met or were attracted to one another. I could see how they discussed meeting during work hours, sneaking around, and even their romantic sentiments toward one another. I just sat with it because I couldn't address her. The fact that she began discussing leaving me motivated me to write this. The worst part is that he didn't like that notion. He hoped she would stay with me. He was content to keep things informal and gossip about. He was only in it for the enjoyment and had no intention of getting married or starting a family with her, and she is currently attempting to convince him otherwise. My son has since advanced even more. He has shown me photos and videos of their encounters. When he was skipping school once more, I suppose he noticed them. They seem to have an informal meeting place. Even though it is now indisputable, I have yet to confront her. I'm furious but need hard evidence, like seeing them in the act. I am still determining my next course of action. I must consider the children. The fact that her own son has witnessed her actions ought to be sufficient punishment. It's often said that children of divorced parents shouldn't turn against their parents. Still, fortunately, I don't have to worry about it. I feel much worse now for putting up with my son's rudeness. I agree with the countless times I've been called a jerk for letting my son handle the nasty chores. I am aware that I made a mistake. However, I believe the accusation caught me off guard, therefore I wanted it to be false. I was scared of what I would discover, so I didn't want to undertake the digging myself. I thus took the cowardly route and let him handle things. Without a second shot at everything, I wouldn't have done things that way. My son's actions were a warning sign that something more serious was happening. I was only trying to get to the bottom of things without making snap decisions, even though using him to gather evidence might not have been the most excellent course of action. It wasn't my best parenting moment, to be sure, but desperate circumstances need desperate solutions. I chose to go straight to a lawyer rather than confront her. I collected all the information, including screenshots, timestamps, and texts, and forwarded it to the attorney. Her work commitments turned out to be meetings with the teacher. The worst thing? She deceived our children by pretending to have urgent work-related matters to attend to while, in reality, she was slinking out to visit Chris. Even when she had to spend time with the children, my attorney was excellent. He got to work on the divorce paperwork immediately, and the proof I had accumulated was sufficient. I persuaded my son to remove the software he was using to track her texts from his phone after I had him put it on mine between when I last wrote and now. They had been emailing each other thirst traps and naked photos, so thank God for that. How practical it is for me. The worst part is that she would return home and be unable to stop touching me on some of the days they were sending those things. I constantly found an excuse to avoid her because I knew she didn't want me. According to my lawyer, I would have a better case for custody in situations like mine if I could demonstrate that she was not just cheating, but also ignoring the children in the process, mainly if that neglect was motivated by her desire to continue her affair. Incorporating the children into her lies could strengthen my case, he added. Regarding finances, there probably wouldn't be a need for alimony because our incomes are comparable. Since it might have an impact on the distribution of assets, my attorney suggested that I maintain a note of anything about the affair that could be demonstrated by her text messages. Any financial assistance she provided to Chris may be advantageous to me. As it happens, she gave him several gifts. Later that week, I would pick up the divorce paperwork the lawyer had already prepared. I later learned, however, that she would have lunch with Chris. She informed me, for example, that she needed to meet with specific master's students to assist them with their research. Our youngest child's birthday was celebrated with her mother and sibling just a few days prior. Even though her own family was present, she made plans with Chris without hesitation, which infuriated me. I hoped she might change her mind, so I invited her for lunch. When she refused, despite the children's requests, I knew I would get even with her. I couldn't wait for the papers because I was so furious. I suggested that my children and family go out to lunch without her. The problem is that I intended to take them to a restaurant in a different city an hour away, where she was meeting Chris. She must have believed that I would never find her there. I wouldn't do it alone. I wanted her to understand the embarrassment she had been causing me. Although many people may disagree, I wanted my kids to see their mother for who she was. I wanted them to know that the divorce wouldn't be my fault because they were mature enough to comprehend. We got to the restaurant that afternoon and took a table viewing the entryway. We were already eating when she and Chris entered a few minutes later, completely encircling one another with their arms. Even though my blood was boiling, I managed to keep my composure. I wanted her to enter the mess right away. When my youngest daughter first saw her, she exclaimed, "Mom's here!" without thinking before recognizing that the arrangement was incorrect. Charity froze when she looked up and saw all of us. I smiled slightly at her and let the quiet speak for itself. She approached, making a feeble attempt to justify herself, but it was in vain. The damage was already done. Her mother, her sister, and our children were all present. I didn't have to speak a thing. She had to bear the embarrassment as I simply shook my head, got up, and left with the children, two of whom were very puzzled. Her expression was priceless, but it didn't repair the harm. After staying behind to speak with her, her mother and sister finally joined us in the car without saying anything. Her sister was furious. Charity tried apologizing when we arrived home, but it was too late. She was abused by everyone. I gave her the divorce papers the following day. She was taken aback. When she realized how much she had messed up and what was at risk, I believe she nearly went insane. My attorney ensured that the conditions were perfect. I fought for complete custody of the children, and she didn't receive a dollar. Although I didn't win on that front, cheating doesn't always make someone less of a parent, I did receive 70-30 custody. The finest aspect? She didn't resist very much. Knowing how severely she had messed up, her sister pressured her. Seeing Charity wreck something positive must have been painful for her sister, who had battled with unsatisfactory lovers. Charity told her pals she was now miserable, and they told me the same thing. I believe that was an effort to elicit sympathy or perhaps even forgiveness from me, but I'm beyond past that. What about Chris? The school system fired him right away because they didn't want the negative press that would come from a teacher having an affair with a married parent. It was satisfying. My children are still getting used to everything. I don't blame them for not saying much. Divorce is always preferable to children living with two unhappy parents. Therefore, even though I hate that it came to this, I believe it was the right choice for everyone. In one way or another, it will always affect them. I sincerely hope that my kids won't suffer anymore now that it's finished, and I simply hope that we can all go on. I want to know that I didn't make a mistake. But now that it's over, I'm prepared to go on to the next phase of my life. And that's it for today's video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.